Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Risa Shoup. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs, and I am a co-executive director of Art New York. I'm a white person with short dark hair and pink plastic glasses. I'm wearing a navy blue knit jacket over an oatmeal colored top and black jeans. As we gather, we at Art New York would like to take this time to acknowledge that wherever we are currently situated on Turtle Island, otherwise known as North America, we are on occupied territory. Art New York's membership in the 5 boroughs of New York City operates on the unceded ancestral land of the Lenape, Wappinger, Canarsie, Rockaway, and Matinecock communities. We want to honor and celebrate all of these indigenous communities, their elders past and present, as well as future generations. We also want to take this time to acknowledge that after there was stolen land, there were stolen people. We want to honor the generations of displaced and enslaved people who built and continue to build the country that we occupy today. Thank you. And since we are gathered today in person as well as in virtual space, let's also take a moment to consider the legacies of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not available to many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect indigenous peoples worldwide. I invite you to join me in acknowledging all this as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, anti-racism, and allyship. Thank you. The virtual part of that land acknowledgement was written by Adrian Wong of Spiderweb Show in Ontario, Canada. And now, welcome to Spring Summit 2025, and thank you for joining Navigating Change, a panel discussion. I have a few remarks before we get to it, so thank you for listening and taking this all in. The Art New York staff is excited to have each of you here and want to take a moment to express deep appreciation for our sponsors. With their support, Art New York is able to offer convenings to New York City theater makers by free of charge. This convening is presented by Broadway World, Arts FMS, with support from 59E59 Theaters, Capacity Interactive, Denham Wolf Real Estate Services, Eisencraft CPA, Finance Friend, and with thanks to our cherished partners, Broadway Babysitters, Qbox, Producer Hub, Sobel Bixel, and Spectrix. Thank you so much. And you can visit a lot of these sponsors next door at the vendor fair. Woo! Your experience while at the Spring Summit is so important to us, and we would really appreciate your feedback as we plan for the future. We really take this feedback in. It's very meaningful. It helps us make smart decisions for the future. So throughout the summit, we encourage you to scan the QR codes, like the ones you see by the door where Nikki is standing, and just take our very, very brief feedback survey. Thank you. And for those of you who may need to duck out early, I'm going to invite you right now to switch your seating to that side of the room. This way, if you do have to leave, you won't cross in front of the camera where we're live streaming this for our friends out there in the internet. Hello, internet friends. And now, we find ourselves in the midst of a generational shift in leadership while we also confront the need to make significant changes to how we are managing our assets and other resources. This demands a level of planning and decision-making that's hard to make time for and comes with significant monetary and other costs. I hope today's panel discussion gives us insight into how we can identify and plan for change with intention and integrity. Please join me in welcoming Danielle King, Director of Program Services.
Oh, thank you, Risa. Hi, everyone here. Thank you for being here in person. Thank you for internet friends of now and of future, because this will live on. Thank you all for doing this with me. It's been so lovely already. So we're going to start off by introducing ourselves. We'll say our names, pronouns if that's available to us, the role or sort of facet in which we're in this space today, and then a visual description. And then I would like to ask each of you to answer a little icebreaker, which is, what does navigating change feel like to you today, in this moment? So I guess I have to model and start. All right. And also not touch the mic. That just. So hi. My name is Danielle King. My pronouns are she, hers. I am the Director of Program Services at A.R.T New York. I am a white woman with brown hair pulled back, some glasses. I'm wearing a navy blue dress, plaid jacket. That's me. I feel like I don't know, cheating a little bit because I've had the pleasure of talking to all of you about navigating change. So today, navigating change feels to me like practice, but it's not an emotion, and hopeful. I'm going to pass it to you, Catherine.
Hi, I'm Katherine Milgram. I use she, hers pronouns. And I am fairly tall, although I'm sitting. I have shoulder-length hair, and I'm wearing a sparkly jacket I'm quite excited about, and black trousers. I'm an organizational consultant and delighted to be with all of you today. Navigating change feels to me like trying to walk in a straight line on a really windy day, and your eyes get watery at the corners.
Amazing.
It's so good.
Hey, thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm May-Ann Teo, Asian person with shoulder-length hair, wearing orange and black with shockingly yellow patent leather boots. I'm an artistic leader at Chong and Company, one of 5 of an artistic leadership team. And navigating change to me in this moment feels like dancing on quicksand.
Hi, my name is Caleb Hammons. My pronouns are they or he, and I am one of 3 co-directors of Soho Rep, a proud A.R.T New York member, and downtown in spirit off-Broadway theater company. I am a queer white person with a shoulder-length, dirty blonde hair that needs some color treatment, and a beard, and cream chunky glasses, and I'm wearing a blue and white striped button-up shirt, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. The question. The navigating change. Yes. So I've been thinking about this almost every day for the past many months, and I think what it feels like is also what I have learned, which is that preparedness is so key, but the thing to be prepared for that I think we often forget to be prepared for is to throw out all of those plans, because that is going to happen.
Yeah, thank you all so much for those beautifully descriptive words and metaphors for navigating change. I specifically wanted to ask this group and start off talking about what it feels like, because our work in the theater and the performing arts and our work, just our lives, right, is so much about telling stories, about human to human connection. We're not robots, wonderfully. We're not robots. We are really complex individuals all of the time. We're responding to and acting upon so much, both making choices within our control and also responding to and making choices about things outside of our control every single day. And so it felt really important to ground us in what it feels like, because that's how we experience the world, and that's so much about navigating every day, navigating change is about sort of like what is that undercurrent of feeling, and how are we acknowledging it, responding to it, caring for it. Like I said, I've had the privilege of speaking to each of these panelists in advance of today, and so I wanted to start us by grounding us a little bit in a sort of thesis that I have formed about change management, which is really that change, it's very simple. Change is inevitable. It is something we can actually count on. We know it's going to happen. It's a constant. And so this work of change management that we're talking about, it doesn't kick in only in the big moments. Certainly, big moments of change, staffing changes, moving out of a building, leadership transitions after founders or long-term leaders move on. But the best change management is a constant, ongoing practice of leadership, of tending to and nurturing the people who you are working with. It's about being intentional, being inquisitive, and constantly curious. And it is leading with humanity, humility, and empathy, and also communicating. A lot of communicating, constant communication. Now, with all of that said, I think there are concepts and ideas about human behavior, about how we engage with each other, that can really help us better understand and identify what's going on in any given situation, and give us tools that can be especially useful in how we guide ourselves and how we work with others and guide others through change. Welcome, come on in. And so one of those areas of study is group dynamics. So this brings me to Katherine. So you've been studying group dynamics and implementing it in your work. And so, I don't know, it's a concept that we are, I think, intuitively we know, but when you say group dynamics, I don't think that's a thing that we know how to define or pinpoint. So maybe if you could tell us about how you define group dynamics.
Absolutely, happy to. So I think of group dynamics, and interestingly, I didn't know that it was a field until I joined it, basically. But I was doing it, so to speak, by following my instincts as a leader, and leading not to individuals, which is not to say that I am inclined to be dismissive of individuality, but to also, so it's an and, also think about the group and the emotional life and the reality of the life of a group. So the group dynamics are patterns of behavior, interactions, the way groups operate, both in their observable behaviors that are perhaps driven by conscious effort, and also the unconscious, under the surface life of the group, the things that are going on that we all exist in groups. So I'm endlessly fascinated by how people interact in groups, and I would encourage you to think about how you just know group dynamics, because you know people, but you also know that feeling of when a group is either really singing together, it really is, everything's clicking, and also when it's not. So challenges in group dynamics are also something that, sort of the easy way out is sometimes to attribute a challenge to an individual. Group dynamics is about thinking about how a challenge is really a challenge for the group as much as it is for the individuals in the group.
The image that has stuck with me since we've been talking is this sort of these streams that are running on top of each other at any given time, right? So there's the sort of surface level work, the what we are doing every day, for a project or for a company or in our homes, right? The day-to-day, and then there's this like dynamic, sometimes a big wave, sometimes just like a little stream running through it and beneath it, that is how we as a group are feeling at any given moment.
The sort of the theory around what Danielle's talking about is that every group is two groups at once. It's the work group, and then people call the other group lots of different things, but it's the emotional life of the group. So the work group, what the group is there to do, what it needs to do to survive, to exist. And then with that, often under the surface, is the emotional life of the group. And those two things are happening at the same time. Yeah.
I think that's there is so much more that we will dig into as we go, but I think that's such a great foundation to start talking about, hearing from Caleb and Mayanne about some real moments of that. So something that came up in my conversations with all of y'all is that because we and our work of making theater does not exist in a vacuum in any situation, we are always dealing with given circumstances. Either decisions that have been made before we joined a project, or things outside our control that we can't change. We can make choices about how to approach them and how to act on them. We can't change them. And so the work is really about understanding, recognizing, naming, understanding those givens, and then sort of like in a relay race, taking the baton and moving forward. So I want to talk a little bit with Caleb about the decision for Soho Rep to move out of Walker Space, which was already, in many ways, already in motion when you and Eric Ting joined as directors with Cynthia at Soho Rep. And that change was years, maybe even decades in the making, depending how familiar you are with that particular building. Some things were already figured out, some things weren't. So can you talk more about, what were the givens that you were entering into?
Sure, yeah. So for people who may not know, Soho Rep occupied a building in Tribeca for 35 years at 46 Walker Street, and it was a small 65-seat black box theater. I don't know that the space was ever meant, I don't know that the company was ever even under this assumption that that would be a long time space. And it felt like, I think for anyone who's familiar with it, it sort of felt like it was a temporary space for 35 years. And part of that,
A lot of dynamics.
yes. So I think part of that, what kept moving that decision down the line was because it was a very beloved space, and it was serving the company until it wasn't. And that was also something that was slowly emerging, and there was a tipping point, which is that the building got sold, and due to the death of the longtime landlord and building owner, who was, a guy who owned a building in Lower Manhattan for since the 70s, and then it was the building was purchased by a real estate conglomerate. So typical New York story, right? Mm-hmm. And we weren't being kicked out, but we were going to be faced with the prospect that that relationship to the new owners and the 30% of market value that we were paying was no longer going to be an option for us. And so that sort of layered with things like, we wanted to serve more people than 65 people a night. We were we were having to run our shows for so long to serve the audiences, which was great in some ways, but also not like the most sort of cost-effective model. And the building was inaccessible. The building was falling apart. The building had, we were not able to get through a tech rehearsal period without losing anywhere from 1/2 to 1 full day because the electricity would go out. And, you know, we couldn't run the air conditioning during the show because the lighting grid and the AC couldn't run at the same time. So anyway, that's one of the many lists, you know, part of a very long list. Anyway, so there was a decision made that, like, okay, we're ready. This is it. We're ready to go. And that was all context. And now I've forgotten what you actually asked.
Those were the givens.
Oh, okay.
So those were the givens, right? We're talking about givens, and then I think the next step is like, then how do you move that forward? So you entered into that situation, those givens, things were already, it was sort of already a foregone conclusion that Soho Rep was going to
move, yes.
And so then, what was it like to come into that process in that moment, and then you, Cynthia and Eric, figure out kind of the next moves?
So these things coincided, I would say not like entirely, not entirely unplanned, that a major leadership transition where 2 of the 3 co-directors were departing the company after a long time, 2 new co-directors were coming in, and the company was leaving our space, that there was a feeling that there had to be something that was there had to be a runway of some sort of planning so that new co-directors were not coming into the organization and just being like, all right, you know, figure it out. And so I think I give a lot of props to our board and to Cynthia and the departing director, Sarah Merope, who were like, you know, this is not a time to make a big permanent decision. What is the way in which, looking at the landscape emerging around us, that we can responsibly think about transition out of having a permanent space and now no longer having a permanent space, but not feeling like we are ready to go immediately from having a 65-seat rental that was falling apart to deciding that we're going to like buy a building or build a building or move into a building or renovate a building and start some major capital campaign when we as an organization have not had the time to really think about what should that be and what could that be. And so a decision was made that there would be a period of time in which the company would be itinerant, and through that process that we would be able to explore neighborhoods. As Brandon Jacobs-Jenkins, who's on our board, says, displacement is in our name. We haven't been in Soho for 35 years, and we haven't been a repertory company since like after the first year of the company's founding in 1975. So it's all a misnomer, but that we would be able to explore the city, explore neighborhoods, our relationship with neighborhoods, build relationship with other neighborhoods. We would be able to think about what is a responsible growth from 65 seats to, you know, under 200 seats, which is, I think, where we eventually want to be, somewhere in that range. And like what it will be like to think about like doing different, like what if we don't do a show that's in a theater? What if it's somewhere else? What if, you know, all of these questions and possibilities. But we also recognize the importance of having some sort of anchor home, like some sort of base. And so a series of conversations had been started with theaters around the city. And through those conversations, for a number of reasons, which I can get into later or what, when Eric and I started, and all this information was sort of downloaded to us, the conversation that sort of came to the top of that list was a conversation with Playwrights Horizons about a type of partnership that could be mutually beneficial to both companies and really felt anti-transactional, but deeply collaborative and a learning exchange from both of our organizations.
Yeah, beautiful. I think what is coming out a lot, and I think it's also what I took away from a lot of the work you have been doing with the other 4 leaders at Ping, Chong and Company, is this idea of like time and runway and like rooting yourself in something in order to give yourself some sort of like stability so that you don't feel completely unmoored.
Yes.
Can I drop some theory?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
I
theory.
love
This
it.
is so good. Okay, let's drop
It's
it.
like therapy.
Yes. I was just going to say, I'm like, this is great. Pull up a chair. I promise not to be dense about it, but so here's what you did. I find this endlessly sort of interesting. So just pull if you want to shut up. But so the experience. Okay, back to the work group and the emotional group. Emotion, like there are tough emotions in all groups, in all organizations. And so a lot of what we build to manage work, we say that there's like the finance group and the marketing people, and we say that that's what we're doing. And to a certain extent, of course, that's what we're doing. We have to organize ourselves to structure our work to get it done. But also, what we're doing is creating containers, structures to manage the emotions. So we're creating kind of, I tend to mix metaphors, apologies, but we're kind of creating the scaffolding that lets us get to do the work. So when we create structures, when we give things names and we stick with the name, we're creating, the theory is a social defense against anxiety. So we're creating a defensive structure that handles some of what's going on under the surface. When we change things, often we mess with those structures. So we might change the name, we might change the building, we might merge 2 groups, we might get a new director or directors. And so we've carefully, often unconsciously, created these structures to manage the emotional life of the group, and then we just start tearing it down. Yeah. So why is change hard? It's often hard because that architecture just falls apart because we think we need to get on with the work. In fact, that architecture is what's been helping us do the work. So when you keep a name, even though the name doesn't represent what the organization does anymore, you're creating that containing structure to keep the emotional life of the group solid, steady at least, so that the work can happen.
Yeah, I love.
Thank you.
I can run off of this actually.
Yes, please,
I can
go.
because I'm finding this so true. And so at Ping Chong and Company, Ping was like, you know what? I made a lot of work under my name. Y'all continue, and you should have your own name. And I was one of those. I was like, but it's okay to keep a PCC. Like we love Ping. We have the archive. We're still going to manage the archive. We still want to sort of like really hold to the artistic legacy of the seminal Asian American artist, you know, who like did all this incredible work with Bruce Allardyce at his side. And so, you know, but there is so much of the emotional life, not just for the people who did the thing. And they're ready. They were like, it's 50 years, I'm done. All right? They had a very different relationship to it than one might imagine for 50 years. They were very generous about it. But the constituents and the communities that are around are actually, and the people who have been working at Ping Chong Company have a relationship and a deep emotional life to the change that is happening. And that's what we're finding right now, that that emotional life is also not just about the ecstatic picture of it, but it's like how 20 years, 10 years, it changes the depth of the emotional investment. And one thing that I'm finding right now is that emotional life is so important because it's a huge mistake to bypass your grief. It's a huge mistake.
We know it for ourselves.
We know it for ourselves.
As individuals.
We know it for ourselves, but I feel like one thing that has been incredibly successful, not only what I see of what you all have done, right? That incredible funeral that you all held, like the way in which the attention to grief is massively important, because you can't actually build a structure on an emotional life that's blowing up. You can't find a new structure to it. It shifts. It's too. And that's something that you have to that I found, that, you know, and it's not just the emotional. It's like the emotional life of the workplace itself, and then the emotional life of the people within that workplace. So, you know, one of my mentors directing, Tony Tacconi, said to me 20 years ago, he's like, if you are directing 15 people in the room, you have to learn how to speak 15 different languages. I thought, what a generous way of thinking about leadership. Learn to speak those languages. And I find that the same in the workplace. Like, I'm actually learning everyone's languages and how they're communicating or not communicating, or like how they're expressing something outright, but what it really means inside of that. And it's something that I feel like is one of the most practices of humanity that we can do, is to really pay attention to what is happening to the people around us and to ourselves. Because oftentimes, you know, I myself will sort of pay so much attention that I'm like, wait, why did I just lose it? Oh, it's because of this inside myself.
I mean, I feel like you're touching on this like wonderful curiosity that you have and that you're speaking about, of like the curiosity to get to know the people you are working with, to get to know the things that exist in the current way of working that people have different relationships to. And that once you start pulling threads or dismantling or disrupting, if you don't acknowledge that, in order to build maybe something even better, then the grief gets bypassed, and then it starts to, you know, the grief doesn't go away. It just manifests in different ways. So, yeah. Do you want to talk more a little bit about the process that you and the leaders have been in with PCC?
Sure. So 50 years of Ping Chong and Company. Ping and Bruce are like, okay, it's time to retire. Jane Jung, managing director, and Sarah Zatz, whose title has changed many times, but essentially is started at Ping Chong Company as an intern 28 years ago. Wow. And is this one of these incredible, like multifaceted, talented human beings who could see how to fill the gaps, and has amazing skill sets of like engagement and development, and also was a maker of Undesirable Elements series, right? So they were actually tasked with the board to figure out what was the next step. And so instead of just replacing, you know, the Ping and Bruce model of two, they were like, is it an artistic chair that we bring in? And then like, what is happening right now? And like, Ping is unreplaceable, right? Like, Ping is so unique to himself that it's like, especially unreplaceable. So I think that what they did was they said, okay, let's bring on 3 generative artists of different generations to sort of help us be the interim leadership team to help us inform what happens next. And so Niall Harris, Talvin Wilkes, and myself joined that team about 2 years ago. And we haven't been in the process of figuring out, well, what is the next model? What is the new name and mission? What kind of work are we going to make? What are the things of the past and the legacy of Ping Chong that we're going to continue? And one of the biggest questions I think that we have sort of gathered around is, what do we have that meets the zeitgeist? What is here, and what needs to be employed for not just our sakes, but for who we serve and the communities that we serve. And so I think that I'll talk a little bit about the process. We in the last 2 years, I think we're kind of like making the ship while sailing. So we've had incredible productions by Niall Harris, at Abrams, at Under the Radar. It's extraordinary work. We continue working on Undesirable Elements. We keep making those. And we're also trying to figure out what is it now with a focus that, honestly, a 5-person leadership team, it's hard to find. So we start to build different models. So we've considered the models of like, is this a spend down model, right? Is it like an archive model? There are 2 people who work there, and we use all of the reserves to do more scholarship into Ping's work and have more of that done with like maybe a new piece, that's being made in partnership with other people. It's a spend down model. Is it really focusing on undesirable elements? Is it move into a place of artist impulse like Ping had, right? So 3 generative artists making new work, that's what it is. Don't do any of the education, don't do, like how do we do a thing to have the size of an organization that can be sustainable right now with an amount of a deficit that is manageable? So what is that? And we looked at all of these things, and we've been through a really rigorous process with the board. We're in this moment where we have a new name, mission, and model that the board sort of soft approved a name, and then we gathered people in our community and potential or people who are starting to come into our community for focus groups. And there are several people in that room today, here in this room today. I'm so happy to see you here. Thank you for being a part of that focus group, to get a sense of like what our community thinks about before going to a board vote. So we really are intentionally thinking about the history, the emotional life, not just of our board, but the emotional life of the teaching artists who have worked with us, the cast that's worked with us, former board members that have worked with us, leaders in the field who really understand change, who understand fashion, who understand, who understand all of these things. It's Amelia for y'all. It's Amelia right there. So how can we actually get their input to understand many more perspectives than our own, because we understand that they actually care. Yeah. And that was what was really profound about the 2 focus groups that we learned. There were visceral reactions to what we said. There were some visceral reactions. And what was there was grief. Yeah. That Ping and Bruce we're like, we're done, we've grieved, we're good. But so many people that cared about the work that they did had not had that chance to grieve. So we're not only holding a move forward process, we're also holding the grieving process of people who are in different places because of their interaction with the organization, and rightly so. Yeah. And what I love about this is that I was actually unfazed by the visceral reactions. I was actually buoyed by the amount of love. Yeah. It's just love. It's just how much they loved Ping and Bruce and the work they made. What a beautiful thing. So we're in the point of focus group. We took all the focus group out. We actually changed wordings of our mission. We had really deep discussions about what this meant, what that meant. We had quick talks with a crisis person, because in this moment, you're not just thinking about press, you're thinking about crisis and risk management. One of our board members actually said that to us. You don't just want press, you want crisis. One of the things that I keep saying in every room is that that's actually really helpful right now. So, and we're in this moment where we're about to go to a board vote on April 9th for all of the things.
It's imminent.
Yeah.
And we're going to launch in June. So yes. Stay tuned. We're going to be announcing a launch event to share with people and share folks. But we're really excited about the process that we've been through and been on, and I want to know what Katherine thinks.
And I will just say, absolutely. Well, I have a prompt for you because I feel like you teed it up like perfectly. But like, I just like the intentionality that like I'm hearing, the empathy, the curiosity, like, I get so excited. This is why I'm so excited to be talking to you all. But what Mayanne was talking about in terms of the focus groups and the visceral reactions is that like proximity to decision making and how you have to account for for how close you are to the decision making, whether you're in the decision making process, but for those who are not, what you have to do to support those people and give them time. So maybe you want to
Yeah, absolutely.
tease all that together.
I mean, the reality is this is theater. Like, you know this. This is people and how to connect with people and humanity and distance and closeness to themes and concepts and stories. I mean, this is like squarely in your wheelhouse. So lean into that, I say. And I think having focus groups that are real, in other words, don't do artificial communication, just like you wouldn't do artificial theater. Like, make it real, because that's how people, close or distant from decisions that impact them, because as you beautifully mentioned a number of times, it's the people inside the organization and the people outside the organization that change is affecting. So figuring out how to connect and really genuinely communicate, it may look like a focus group, it may look like a really nicely worded letter. It really just depends. But I think the key in communicating change is to think about the person on the other side of the conversation and their relationship to whatever it is that's changing. Because, as we all know, everyone's experience to our interacting with our organizations is informed by all kinds of stuff that we have no idea about. So when we change things, when we do things, we're tapping into a deep well of experience that we know nothing about. So if we're trying to affect change in a way that meets people where they are or brings them along, usually brings them along, acknowledging that we don't know everything, but that what we do know we are communicating empowers people. I think that's what's often at the heart of it, is that we want to communicate in a way that empowers people to do with information what they will, as opposed to, I'm going to give you the information that serves my needs, best of luck. Sort of like
Look with your needs.
Exactly. Just sort of flipping the script a bit, which again, I mean, having this conversation in different kinds of industries and thought groups is a different deal. Theater is a place where I think this resonates in a really provocative, interesting way, because everybody is experiencing theater in their own. I mean, I'm an avid theater goer, not a theater maker, but I experience it in ways that I know weren't anticipated, because there's no way that anyone making a particular production knows about this little nugget of a thing that connects me to it. So think about change communication the same way. That's what the focus groups did, I think, is they gave people a place to engage, to really engage with the information. That's not going to be the way you engage with every single person who connects with the theater. Like, of course not. But finding those different mechanisms, being creative about it, I think that's the trick.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I love, like, yeah, that we are, at any given time, we are connecting with like a well of deep lived experience that we know nothing about. But man, isn't that like, on the flip side, talking about like love, like seeing that as love, seeing the expression of whatever they're saying or feeling as love. It's like the opportunities, the possibilities that can come from that, because we're all these like richly complex, complicated, constantly changing individuals that are then coming into a group is really beautiful.
One example of that, when you're talking about, you know, it's not artificial, like the most difficult thing about our transition and our change was changing our Google search to not attach us to 46 Walker Street. And like that feels symbolic to me because that was not a conversation that we could have, and that was not a focus group or a moment of like bringing people together. And I think that like we were both, I think, coming into these sort of like legacy, like downtown rooted places. And I think a big part of the conversation for us was like separating that kind of, like, how do you get to grieving? How do you allow for grieving that isn't also just attached to romanticizing and nostalgia, but like, how do you like extract, like, we get so rooted in place, right? And I think for us it really started as like, well, does downtown even exist anymore? And like, is that, and so like, just I think starting from the place of even being like, geography in the city is, who knows, like it changes every day. There's no like, there's the neighborhood, the idea of neighborhoods is shifting and changing constantly. And so if we like actually claim this idea of downtown as like a spirit rather than a location, that's sort of what led us then to this, you know, campaign, so to speak, of Soho Rep is not a building. And like the like detaching both of those things. And I think when we were able to do that internally and then start to like look at both of those, like who we are as an organization and what this building meant to people, that allowed us to like also build in that like moment to say, let's recognize this building, what it meant, and what it, you know, what people loved about it and were frustrated about it, and were, you know, like the things that they were ready to leave behind. And then let's also focus on everything that we're taking with us and how that is not rooted by place, that's not rooted by location, that's not rooted in bricks and mortar, but that is like, that is people, that is like values, that's approaches. And you know, the thing that like one of the things that we heard so many times was, I'm so glad I never have to use that bathroom and the reason I loved that was because it was like, that to me was a way of people saying, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna follow Soho Rep and I'm going to like go where you go, but thank God I don't have to walk down those stairs and squeeze into that stall again. You know?
You communicated with your audience, not just the organization. In 35 years, it's downtown. So some of us stay in the same apartment for a really long time. I speak from experience. But how many of your audience have moved many, many times in that 35 years? You connected with them by moving. They moved, they said goodbye, and they left apartments and homes that they didn't love and moved to new ones that they didn't love in different ways. but that's a communication in and of itself, just acknowledging that you were doing that. It's connecting to the experience of your audience in a really cool way, I think.
I want to like lift up what you said about romanticization and nostalgia, because I really think that nostalgia is the enemy of progress. And it's when we look back at something with some rosy colored thing, that's what creates a situation that we can't actually move things forward. That we have to like uphold some perfect notion of the past that can never be created again because Sarah and Merope have left. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's actually the enemy of progress, and it's what healthy leaders who leave will say, don't do that.
Yeah.
Which I feel very lucky, actually, because it feels like we have that, and it feels like you all have that, right? So I also experienced this tremendously on Monday, on Morgan Jenness' Day. And for those who don't know Morgan Jenness, just find out about Morgan Jenness. And there's something about how not nostalgic of a celebration of their incredible life, of a day and night long celebration that was truly tremendous in teaching me how to not only grieve, but celebrate and actually be imbued with a way forward that is not about the past. So from the first sermon to happen, that Reverend Billy of the Stop Shopping Choir did was, Morgan would fucking hate this. Full day long, night long, like they would hate this. But we're doing it anyway, Morgan, too bad, because we're doing it for us and what we need. And I felt like that was consistent in the straight talking, clear-eyed nature of Morgan, that was actually clear throughout the day, even when we allowed ourselves to like fully be in our grief and love of who we have lost. But it was always also of like, actually, what would they say? They would say, you can and you must. It's sort of ringing in my body right now when I think about like navigating change. It's like, you can and you must. And that sort of like clear-eyed nature of where they were, from the institution of Tompkins Square Park to La Mama to the public to Judson Memorial Church with Washington Square Park in between, and everyone that spoke to their experience of them. Everyone that spoke, from George C. Wolfe to their students, to Reverend Micah Busey, who was their assistant when they were an agent for 10 years, and then Morgan was like, yeah, you should go hang out at Judson, when Micah was like, I don't know if I want to be an agent, I want to be a reverend. I mean, my goodness, what an incredible impact that they had. And it wasn't about nostalgia. Like, we can do this. We can do this navigating change without nostalgia. Like, I have experienced it, and I can't say, and grief does not have to fall into nostalgia.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Talk.
I think we get pulled into binaries. Yeah. I mean, right, we know this. And one that I worry about sometimes as a leader myself is future good, past bad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I like the focus on grief. Mm-hmm. But if nostalgia equals past good, future bad, well, that's not what we want either, right? So it's the gray, it's both. It's not the binary. So I think that's a really, I think the pendulum can be sort of all over the place on this. It doesn't need to be sort of wild swings in either direction.
Yeah. Totally agree. I think nostalgia for me is past only good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or must keep must hold on so tightly.
Yeah.
Cannot take it all. Yes, we can change, but like take it all with us. Right. Must keep it all and like build other things on top of it.
Well, we're ephemeral. That's what we do, you know? Like, we can't, it's never gonna happen again. And I think that's like a lesson that I think or like a challenge that any organization that has had the good fortune and privilege of creating like meaningful work and supporting meaningful contributions to the field, that like people are always going to want to hang on to those moments that felt like impactful, right? Like, but I think what we have to tell ourselves is like, it is okay for us to continue to talk about, Sarah Kane's Blasted being in New York for the first time, which Danielle was the stage manager for. Little secret, fun fact. It's okay to talk about like an octoroon. It's okay to talk about Jackie Sibley's Drury's New York debut, but those are never gonna happen again. And we can't, we are not seeking to recreate that, but what we are seeking to do is to replicate in a responsive way to the world we live in today and the realities that we live in today, the conditions that will allow those things to continue to happen.
Yeah. The zeitgeist is always changing.
Yeah.
Got to respond to the zeitgeist. I think that's I want to give you a moment, Caleb, because you all have moved out of Walker Space and you just closed your first show in your new, sort of grounding home in Playwrights Horizons. When we talked, it hadn't closed yet. So I was trying to be like, so what have you learned? How does it feel? What is it like? You were like, I am so fully in it right now. We did all of this in 4 months' time.
Yeah, I don't recommend that part of it. But also it did, I think I said this to you too, there was a bit of if you don't, there is such a thing as having too much time to overthink things. And there is, I think, something to be said about in the test of what is really the essence of what you're doing that is just gonna, when you have no time to think about it and you're just doing it, those things seem materialize and surface much quicker, I think, or much clearer than if we were we're going to, really just dissect every little part of this, that it was more well, we're just gonna, we're just taking all, we're just doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that there was, what I feel very grateful for, and that I feel was a little boost of, okay, you haven't fucked it up, was the response not only to people who had been long Soho Rep patrons and supporters and community who felt oh, I felt like I was going to Soho Rep. I felt like I was seeing a Soho Rep show. The opportunity that feels very central to our values and our mission, which is to help launch a voice, a new voice, and a critical new voice into the sphere with Nia Akila Robinson, and the memory and like and the experience of having a realization in the first several weeks of the run. We were doing these live curtain speeches every night, and part of that was to like be like, hey, this is who we are, and we're in this partnership with Playwrights Horizons, but we've been around for a while, and has anyone never been to Soho Rep before? And like getting to like have those moments of realizing like, oh, for like a big part of that audience, like I was like, oh, this is their Soho Rep. Like they don't, like that's like, you also like realize like all of that kind of, it's the same thing of like, you know, nostalgia. There's like, I think that we realized that we were playing with like we were facing two different kinds of nostalgia in a way when we were starting to have these conversations around leaving the space, which was the nostalgia from people who were there and experienced it, and then the nostalgia from the people who didn't experience, and that like concept of nostalgia for the thing that you never experienced in the first place, which is very real, I think, especially in the city, like where we have this tendency to like romanticize or long for the version of New York City that we never had.
Yeah.
But like having that moment of being like, oh right, like there are still people coming here. There are still people experiencing things for the first time in the city, and that's like you can't discredit that. And so it's also like I can't wait for like the people who are gonna be like get to have that moment where they experience your and your cohort's vision of PCC, and then get to learn about King and like get to like it's like a rather than like I don't know, I'm like making this up as I'm saying, but it's like sort of learning in reverse, I guess. Like it's like you're focused on the now, and that's your gateway into the past, rather than like being stuck in the past and like I don't know, clamoring to try to like get back to that.
Right. Well, and it's just the perspective changes based on who we're taught, right? For you, it's like for someone who's gonna get to experience PCC and Soho Rep for the first time, that's their starting point, right? So it's not going in, that's where they start, and then like they build their experience forward and also get to understand part of the past and then get to bring that with them, versus people who have, you know, been with PCC or Soho Rep for a while, and now this is like the next era of their experience, right? They're bringing history along with them or building on that history. I don't know. I was trying to make sense of that myself. I want to give you all opportunity to like ask each other more questions or say more. Is there anything coming up?
I could talk to y'all like for 1,000 years. I'm curious about how, you know, I said dancing in quicksand, and it really does feel like that sometimes, and especially in this moment. And I'd like to ask you how, like, in addition to the work life and the emotional life, what about the structures that hold that from the outside that we have no control over, or we have some control over, or we might have less or more control than we think we do? And how to navigate that?
Give us some tools.
Yeah. My favorite piece of learning, I think, in the sort of group dynamics field is borrowed from another field, open systems theory. So we've all seen, I mean, My day job is also that I'm a corporate lawyer. I live in the land of like org charts and corporate things. I think we're all reasonably familiar with a good solid org chart. Thank you, Microsoft Word.
Clippy.
Open systems theory was borrowed into the field of group dynamics or system psychodynamics to sort of think about groups and organizations as living organisms that have a boundary that delineate the organization from its environment, from the outside world. And like in living organisms, organizations have a porous boundary. People are coming and going, thoughts are coming and going from the organization. They come in, they get transformed by the organization, so that's the living organism activity. Stick with me, promise, this metaphor has a point. And so instead of an org chart where the executive director is at the top, and then there are managers, and we sort of understand the organization that way. If instead the visual we use, as we do in system psychodynamics, is to think of an organization as an organism with substructures, subsystems within it, and it has a boundary and sub-boundaries, subsystems, and that's where leaders sit. Leaders don't sit up here. Leaders sit at the boundary and work at the boundary of the organization, making sense of the delineation between inside the organization and the environment. And so being a part of that function of what comes in, what goes out, and helping the organization make sense of how it relates to its environment and the outside world. So I think the way I think about it, at least, is that the environment, of course, is always changing, and plenty of that we can't control. But if we are leaders, we do have this, I think, quite privileged seat to sit at the boundary and to decide what of that is coming in. It's not an endlessly open boundary, because if that was the case, it wouldn't be a boundary. It wouldn't be an organization. So it can't be that everything comes in, then there's no organization, then it's just out there in the environment. So to me, I'm a quite visual person. This is like a helpful construct for me as a leader to think of within the greater societal environment or within my part of an organization that's a subsystem within the larger organization I'm in. How can I help the people that I contain? This is this concept of containment that probably many of us have heard of from psychology. How can I help contain what's going on in my part of this system? That's going to be different for every group and every organization, but situating yourself at the boundary, I think, is empowering, maybe. Maybe it's a lot of responsibility, but it does, I think it has a tendency to empower, to think of yourself there.
Yes.
Okay, good. I asked, is that helpful? I mumbled, is that helpful?
It's so helpful because when I think about sometimes we think about things being so static.
Yeah.
Like, we are located at 47 Great Jones, but even in this conversation, like even our location is not static, right? And thinking about it as an organism and with the forces that are coming at it makes me go, oh yeah, just actually relocate. Actually focus this way, find the nooks and crannies, adjust. And that really helps me understand that, like, even that is porous. So even though there's a porous nature, and our job is actually, I love what you said, to decide what comes in, and then how we respond to what is actually coming in. And I think that when I see too hard of a boundary of like things that cannot come in, people inside are like, but that's out there. Like we can't actually just like ostrich ourselves, there. So it's also being able to like understand what will come in no matter what,
Yes.
and then be able to metabolize that together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what you gave is it really helps me understand the fluidity of that boundary.
Cool.
Yeah.
Glad.
Fluidity and you can't put up the walls and just be like, nope, we're just going to leave it out there, right? There is both an acknowledgement and choices to be made about what you let in, but also about how you metabolize once you
You're
let it
theater
in.
people, you do this. You do this. Like, this is what you do in the theater. You're deciding what to take in, metabolize, and give back to all of us. So I think applying that in the organizational sense is just translating something that in theater is like, that's the deal.
When I was talking with Mayanne, we talked about how dramaturgs are just like primed for this way of thinking and sort of considering, the surface level, the text, and like everything that's going on, and the nooks and crannies, and not going on. And it's coming up.
I'm going to give you the honorary title of dramaturg. Because that's what you've been doing today.
Systems dramaturgy.
Systems dramaturgy.
Yeah.
Like, this
You're
is
not
a
one of us.
really big moment. Because in college, I would always try to like help my theater friends and take tickets or something, but the dramaturgs were like doing the real stuff. So this is a big moment.
I'm glad we could have this moment.
Thank you.
With that, I think we will maybe open up for a couple of questions. Yeah? Oh, excellent. Thank you, Nikki. Let's give an applause while they get the mic for Nikki Maggio, our programs manager, our producer of this Spring Summit, as well as Ashley J. Hicks, who's sitting over there. Questions?
Hi, thank you so much for this panel. It was wonderful. And one of the things that you guys have been just talking about this whole time, which has been really resonant, is just like this emotional connection to the theater. And that's why we do theater, because like we're all really good like administrators, fundraisers, marketers. We could go off and do anything that would make more sense, but there's this emotional connection to theater that is like, no, it's worthwhile. Like, but then at the end of the day, one of the words that I was kind of hoping you were all going to talk about at some point was labor. And that it takes a lot of work both on your end, but it also takes, like the stagehand sweeping up confetti at the end of every night. So how do you grapple with this thing that is not rational and not like, Risa, I think, yesterday at one of the panels said, like, economically efficient, which I really liked, and I'm going to see it. Like, it's not that. But it also, there is a lot of labor involved. And how do you protect yourself, but also how do you protect people within your systematic organism?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, one of the, coming out of the pandemic, Soho Rep's biggest step forward at that point was through Project Number One, which is a program that was developed at Soho Rep during the pandemic with a group of 8 artists who were brought on full-time staff while theaters were closed to help vision what should come next. And the primary banner from that was, we need to be compensated better and differently and more fairly and equitably and in a considered way that makes sense in relation to the organization. And so the way that manifested at Soho Rep was a tying artist compensation to a sort of standard for us weekly rate that was equal to the average administrative staff salary. And then that became a core value and tenet of the organization was to think about labor and pay equity across everything we did. Now, that doesn't, again, like, I mean, talk about like working in a form that makes no economic sense and then making that even harder on yourself, especially when another core tenet of your organization is accessibility to the work, meaning that we weren't going to raise ticket prices to also try to fill that gap. But I think the way that this comes back to change as well, and where we're still in this conversation and debate, even like within our closest sort of circle, is one of the ways that we have been able to do that, and it is not, I will not like say that it is sustainable. I will not say that it is like, that it makes any sense. It's taken a lot of effort and a lot of work to also bring like funders along to support that, to bring, you know, everyone along. But we have very, very little overhead. And we have even less overhead now that we don't have a building. And so what it does allow us to do is like focus as much of our resources as we possibly can on people over stuff. And I mean, that is, I think that is really central right now to us in the conversations that are starting around like what does come next, because I think we know that we eventually want a home of some sort. We eventually want to land in a place, but what does that mean for an organization who prioritizes people over stuff? And so that's just, I mean, that is like that is the base of this conversation that has just started now, of like, what if we have a capital campaign which feels inevitable, what are we actually raising capital for? Is that like, and how do you think about a capital campaign differently that is not just about bricks and mortar, but about people as well?
Thank you.
Have you heard of the 7 or 8 types of rest? So I just learned about this. And there's like, you know, like mental rest, emotional rest, like when you binge watch something because your mind needs to rest, and then there's like the actual rest, and there's like rejuvenating rest, and there are like lots of different kinds of rest. And to me, that speaks to at least how many kinds of labor there is, right? So there are many different kinds of labor. And I think that especially in a capitalist country, there's so much about like physical labor that is much less valued in some cases than there is the mental labor. And there's just a lot of different kinds of things. And I think for me, what I'm realizing is that that every kind of labor will have a different kind of tax on the body and the spirit over time. And so those are kind of the coordinates on which I think that I am navigating, of understanding what kinds of labor have been at play for periods of time, and then what that does to relationships, and how to sort of really understand that to see how one might be able to support the rest from that labor and compensate in ways that are not transactional, but more of like how to care for the whole. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've got 8 minutes. How about one more question? Because these are very meaty questions, and I feel like we spend time on them. No? Okay. Any parting, lasting ideas, questions, thoughts, feelings?
I have a thing of like, what are you looking forward to in this next year in terms of change, and in terms of navigating these waters ahead of us?
heavy question. Mm. I think, you know, I believe that, I think like I guess what kind of keeps me trying to get up every morning and go is that I believe, like, you know, humans are always going to make art. That is actually something you can't take away. And there's a, you know, we are in a time, and we are probably going to be even more in a time where that is going to be trying to be taken away from us. And it's not the first time that's happened. It probably won't be the last time that has happened. But we still keep making art. And I think we are I would say maybe we're in a more conscious position right now about care and respect for labor and difference, and that there's I guess my hope, and it's also not to like romanticize being in a really vulnerable time, but that there's motivation again to just keep going. I think is this fascination or like interest in like how we can all come together to think about how to keep making work in a responsible and responsive and caring way when our environment is telling us you can't do that or you shouldn't do that, or we're trying to make that harder for you. It's my trying to be hopeful outlook.
The environment of change, I mean, I think this concept of the experience of change being all around us, Danielle said it, like, just be a human is sort of what I'm looking forward to, is because I think if we're thinking about what's happening in turbulent times, and we're thinking about whether it's making art or just engaging with one another as human beings, I happen to think a lot about it, human beings in groups. I encourage you to as well. But think about how groupings of people are reacting and supporting, and thinking about the life of groups that you're in or that you think about being in, and also the life of groups that you're not in. I think it gives us some perspective on what's going on and helps us kind of stay steady. I also think unexpected change is something, even as we were gathering today, you know, the event started long before it started, kind of a thing. We talked about the fear of unexpected things that are happening. And I think a lot of people are carrying a lot of fear of unexpected change. On our own behalf, on behalf of groups that we're in, on behalf of loved ones, people we know. I would just say, I feel, and I'm really glad to be able to share it with all of you, I feel buoyed by having some tools in that to think about navigating it as a human being and in an intentional way. You don't need to hire a consultant to help you navigate unexpected change or predicted change or what have you. But if it is unexpected or scary or big and challenging, hire one. Or just ask another leader who's also been through change. Because I think we are at a moment where sort of our connectedness in this experience, however we're all experiencing it, our connectedness in paying attention to it can allow us to be resources for one another. So I came to this work, as Danielle alluded to, I came to this work because I was interested in it in my own experience of trying to figure out how to be a good leader. And like, there are things to read out there, there are things to do out there, and then sort of being that support for each other is, I'm like endlessly a silver linings person, but it does give us an opportunity, and so I like to try to focus on that.
We have everything we need. We just might not remember. So what are your practices for remembering? Everything that's happened has happened before, here or someplace else. So how do we remember? What are the practices for remembering? And like, someone asked me on Monday when we were on the parade, they're like, how are you doing? And I was like, I think I'm walking one foot in front of the other, but I'm looking ahead. And that's what I'm gonna end with.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you. You all are so cool and amazing. I feel really so much gratitude and love for all of you being here today and sharing all of this and being in conversation. And I hope this helps us have a sort of like different perspective on how those connections, those emotions, the emotional life is so important to acknowledge and to like let in, and the living organisms image is gonna live with me for a while. So, thank you all so very much. Thank you for tuning in, for being here. We have a lunch available for all of you, a yummy lunch. Please stick around and enjoy, and happy Friday.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thanks.